You don't need to have a huge meal that's going to tank your blood sugar, right? Because that's what ends up actually affecting your performance. But having something that's going to stabilize your blood sugar through the rest of the day is going to be really beneficial. And by the way, the time of the day in which your body absorbs the most amount of protein is the morning. And so if you are trying to gain muscle, it's beneficial for you to be having breakfast and maybe having an earlier dinner.
An entrepreneur straight out of New York City, Michael Chernow. What's cracking?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Creatures of Habit podcast. It is hot in New York City. It is hot in New York City. I took a run this morning at around, 8 o'clock, and it is now, 12:14, and I'm still sweating. It's ridiculous. So yes, New York City is very, very hot in the summertime. I'm sitting with Chloe Harrouche. Chloe is the founder of a really cool company called the Lanby. It is a concierge primary care practice in New York City. So it is a concierge primary care practice in New York City that is essentially was built out of her experience and navigating the troubles and issues that we tend to all have in this country with healthcare. It started with her when she was 23 years old. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had to navigate through that, and it was obviously not an easy thing to do. Anybody that's get a diagnosis like that really is looking for support in every possible way, and I'm sure we'll get into that story about how she experienced that. And then with some infertility issues that she had, again, sort of dealing with the healthcare system that we currently know it here in the United States. And so she was inspired to want to make a change. And she spent some time in healthcare growth strategy, and then ultimately has founded the Lanby, which I'm super excited to talk about as well. Chloe, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's good to be here and meet in person. I was on your podcast a couple of months ago, and we had a really, really good time. And so we've done a podcast swap, and I like doing that. So why don't you just give us a little bit of a background before we dive into some habits and some stuff about healthcare?
I mean, you highlighted it pretty well, but when I was 23, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And actually before then, I had been in and around the healthcare system as a healthcare consultant. I was a bioengineer, so I understood healthcare really well, but it was through that experience of being a patient that I got to see just how difficult it is when you're the one trying to navigate it. And for me, what I struggled with the most was just the lack of coordination, right? Like I was the one that had to, find the right doctors, make sure that I was asking those doctors the right questions, make sure that those doctors were in communication with each other and everyone was on the same page. And it just felt like this was a huge burden that like all of a sudden, if I dropped the ball, like everything would fall apart. So that was a huge responsibility that I didn't feel was appropriate for me to be handling. And then secondly, there was no emphasis on prevention. Like once I was done with treatment, I was incredibly motivated to take back control over my health. I really wanted to do whatever I could to minimize my chance of recurrence, optimize my health, feel that sense of strength again. And so when I would go to my doctors and say, give me the manual for living a long, healthy life, and they just didn't have one. Like they didn't have those tips and tricks or recommendations on diet, on supplementation, on general lifestyle habits that really help to support that long-term health. And that's when I started to look elsewhere. That's when I started to really feel that the healthcare system had failed me. And so, I was looking at wellness. I was listening to podcasts, listening to different research articles, and just trying to find whatever information I could to really help to elevate what I was doing day to day. And then all of a sudden I got to a point where I was like, this is all very overwhelming, right? Like there's so much information out there. Who do I trust? What do I do? And I just sort of, clung to, this idea that like I needed to find a partner within the healthcare system to guide me, because I, as much as I feel like I understand healthcare, as much as I, want to pretend to play doctor, I did not feel comfortable being the one to administer these decisions in my own health, knowing that I had a history of cancer and that like my health was fragile at the end of the day. And so I looked at primary care, hoping that primary care would be that partner for me. But that's when I realized that primary care today is ultimately a shell of what it should be, right? It should be a first line of defense. It should be the place that you go to for guidance, for longevity, for, prevention. And what it is actually just urgent care. And so I felt this sense of
like emergency room.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually, unfortunately, not as fast as urgent care in that you're waiting probably 30 to 45 minutes just to see the doctor, and the visit with the doctor is 8 minutes. So it's just a very unpleasant experience. You leave more frustrated than you went in with, and you have more questions after the visit than you came in with. So it's an experience that most people actually avoid. And if you ask around, most people today will tell you they don't have a GP. And the reason they don't is because, again, the experience is so bad. It's so useless. And obviously that's a huge issue today because we're seeing that so many people have chronic disease. About 52% of people in the US have at least one chronic condition. And most of those chronic conditions are preventable. But they're not being prevented because people don't have a primary care doctor. And so what they're doing instead is that they're waiting for their health to get so bad that they go to the emergency room or they go to a specialist, and they're dealing with their health in a very siloed and piecemeal way. So they're getting Band-Aid solutions, topical. They only serve to just quell the symptoms for a short period of time. Then those symptoms come back and they come back angrier. And we're not really solving the root issues of these symptoms. And so these symptoms are turning into chronic issues.
I mean, it's like when I hear you say that, like my mind starts racing in a number of different directions. But really, like what I think about is in the last, let's call it 75 to 100 years, right? The exposure to man-made chemicals that are in the atmosphere, in our food, in our water, everywhere. Almost impossible to dodge and or avoid. Right? Like avoiding these things is very, very difficult based on just the atmosphere and the environment that we live in.
Yeah.
And I don't think our systems or any systems globally are prepared to navigate what the side effects and the ramifications of these things that we're exposed to just by being alive. I don't think that they're prepared to sort of come up with some sort of solution to how to keep people healthy. So like my thought process, and I think this is like 101, is I'm exposed to the same thing everybody else is exposed to. However, I know that if I'm very mindful about what I put into my body, how I move my body, how I sleep, and who I surround myself with, like I am way ahead of the game, right? I'm way ahead of the game. And I'm one of those people that I don't have a primary care physician. I mean, I do, right? Because insurance requires that, but I've never been to that person. Right. And now I don't live in New York City anymore. If I did live in New York City, I'd be at your door. That's for sure. But I live in upstate New York, and I get my blood work done every 3 months because I am a maniac about my health.
That's how it should be. That's what we do at the Lanby.
I think it's so important.
Yeah.
I always say, like, if you don't know what's under the hood and you don't know what's going on, how do you expect to run optimally? And if running optimally is not like a focus for you, it should be.
Well, so the other issue is that we as a society are increasingly interested in wellness. Like there's no questioning the fact that, especially in markets like New York and California, people are very passionate about their health. But the problem is that they're not applying that passion towards clinical modalities. They're applying them towards the wellness industry. And the reason for that is because the wellness industry is much more fun and exciting and pretty, whereas the healthcare system is ugly and bureaucratic and red tapey and cumbersome and miserable to navigate. And so the reason why we're seeing that now we're going almost too extreme with the wellness industry is because there is no data to how we should be personalizing our approach to wellness. And so my whole mission with our new offering called Just the Labs is to empower people to use their lab work to personalize their approach to wellness. So as opposed to just literally going to a CVS and saying like, oh, I should be taking all of these multivitamins and all of these amazing like supplements because I've heard on TikTok and Instagram that this is going to be good for me and this is going to support my hair health and this is going to support my metabolic health. Like, no, you actually should be probably looking more closely at what you specifically need. Where are your deficiencies? And then let's help you prioritize your budget to maximize the impact that you're seeing in your health. Because we don't all have unlimited budgets. So how do we better tailor what our supplement regimen looks like, what apps we're using, what diet we're following to be able to see the results that we're looking for?
2017 to 2018 was the worst year, arguably, of my life-ish. Aside from when I was drinking and doing drugs, outside of that, that was a rough year for me, if not the roughest, because I had undiagnosed Lyme disease. And it had probably, I don't know when I actually got the tick bite or however I contracted it, but it really sort of surfaced in 2017 in a very severe way. And honestly, not a single primary care doctor, and I did try a number of them to see, I didn't know much about functional medicine then. I mean, I was in the world of wellness, but it was not where it is today, right? And so I just didn't know where to go because every doctor I saw, including specialists, told me I was totally fine based on my labs. Now, they weren't running like 30 biomarker, 50 biomarker lab panels, and so they couldn't detect what was going on with me. But ultimately, I found a functional medicine doctor. And here's the problem with functional medicine. I believe in it hardcore, but insurance companies do not. Right? And so you go to see a functional medicine doctor, and typically they're not going to accept insurance or like the insurance that most people have, which is regular insurance that, is not necessarily out of network and all those things. So I was walking into these functional medicine docs and literally I was spending like $2,000 a visit. And then once I found out I had Lyme disease, I went to a Lyme specialist in my region because, the Northeast is like the hotbed for Lyme. They had all the newest technologies and everything, but they didn't take insurance. So I go in there and the doc was like, you need to do HBO2, you need to do, ozone therapy, you need to do all these things. And he was like, $2,500, $1,200, $800. And I'd walk out and I'd be like, this is a $6,000 trip. We are way behind as a country, in my opinion. Now, I feel like there's a lot of people that live here, right? So you can only imagine the stacks that these healthcare systems have to deal with of people in pain, people struggling. So I don't know how we get over it, but I'm excited to talk to you about it because you are taking a step forward here, and you're saying, you know what, I'm putting my career and my life on the line to try and say, hey, there is a better way. And I'm starting small, right? How many locations do you have?
We have one location.
So there you go, right? One location. And I commend you for really taking the step there. I want to talk to you about some habits because I would imagine that, all the things that we discussed in the world of wellness are things that you probably put front and center in your life. What does your sort of morning look like?
So today, my morning routine is very different than it was 5 years ago, and that's partly through the fact that I've learned a lot about just what wellness really should mean for me relative to, a guy. So 5 years ago, I was doing a lot of habits that were actually detrimental to my health that I didn't realize because they were being applauded by the Peter Attias of the world as like the best thing to do, right? Like intermittent fasting being the first thing that comes to mind. Now, I do not intermittent fast because it's really bad for my hormone health. So what I try to do is I wake up at 5:30 every morning. I work out for 45 minutes. I don't drink a significant amount of water before working out. So my water intake really starts after I work out. After I work out, I fill up a large probably 36-ounce bottle of water with Kion aminos and creatine. And then I get ready for the day, go make my kids breakfast. By 7 o'clock, I'm getting them out of their cribs. I have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I've made them breakfast, take them out of their crib, give them breakfast. And while they're having breakfast, I'm drinking the rest of my aminos. Then after that, I transition over to lemon water. And I love having my lemon water. Like, I actually used to only have lemon water in the morning. And now recently I've added the aminos in because I need to boost my protein absorption. And creatine has also been shown to help with brain health. And so because I have the ApoE4 mutation, which is a mutation that increases the risk of Alzheimer's, I'm very focused on brain health. So that's been something that I've added into my supplement regimen.
How many grams of creatine do you use a day?
Honestly, I don't really know what the grams are. I just know that it's a scooper.
Probably 5 grams.
Yeah. It's also Kion brand.
Yeah, I'm a huge creatine advocate.
Yeah. I had never even considered taking creatine but I also think for the sake of like muscle development and all of that, it's great. And
well, it was like a real bro thing forever until about 2 years ago, 3 years ago maybe, when they started really, I think, publicizing more of the studies that they've done on it. It is the most studied sports supplement, performance supplement in the world. And I think that there are studies coming out that it's actually it's not way more, but it's actually more beneficial or impactful for females than it is for males, which is really cool and interesting.
Yeah, because that's also because women tend to eat less red meat. And creatine comes from the red meat. And so because women just eat less red meat, they're not getting as much creatine in their diet. But I also think that that's a very interesting fact. But anyway, so after that, I take my kids to school, get back. Either I go to the office or I work from home. My week is split between both. Have breakfast, usually at around 9. So that's probably I want to say I finished dinner at like 7:45. So it's definitely not a crazy long fast. And then I'll have my coffee after that. So I try to not have coffee before I have my breakfast because I don't want to spike my cortisol too much, especially because I've worked out already. And then supplements after breakfast, I take Pro Omega, which is an omega-3 fish oil supplement.
You got to check out. I've just recently been introduced to a new fish oil supplement called Puori. I met this guy at a dinner, and he's Danish, and so he and I hit it off because my wife is Danish. But he's got arguably the most incredible, like, third-party tested for every single thing you can possibly imagine. I mean, they go absolutely ham on their third-party testing for these fish oils. But the company is called Puori, and it's the best fish oil I've ever used, for sure, 100%. And they're out of Denmark. They're kind of like Thorn on steroids in Europe. And they're very big in Europe, but they're making their way to the States. I just putting a little.
You can buy it from.
Yep, on there, so you can buy it here, and it's just the cleanest, purest fish oil. Like, typically, fish oil for me is something that I'm definitely, omega-3s are very important to me, and I've had to go to krill oil because I just can't handle the majority of fish oils. Like when I use other fish oils aside from Puori, I have that fish flavor that I can't stand because I think it actually breaks it down and brings it through the liver. Krill oil does not go, like, it bypasses for whatever reason that process, so you don't get that fishy flavor. However, Puori, they're like they clearly state that there's something in there that does not create that flavor. It's an amazing product. Highly recommend. Little plug for those guys.
Yeah, I think a fish oil is good for everyone to take.
Yep.
Specifically for brain health, hormone health. So I do that. And when I'm not feeling well, I also take the wellness formula. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's just a really, really good multivitamin. Has vitamin C, has vitamin D, zinc, whatever for when you're actually under the weather. It's like a great one. And my kids are always sick, it feels like, so I'm just like popping those in. And then inositol is one that I started recently too, which is very good for metabolic health.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that still sounds like a pretty intense morning routine. If I'm curious what the 5 year ago one was. I just also want to talk about intermittent fasting, because there was some years there where it was like the topic of conversation
Oh, yeah.
in every single group I was in. And I've just got to say that, like, even though sometimes, because I did intermittent fasting for so long, it just became part of my thing, and I stopped intermittent fasting probably 4 years ago. I don't eat first thing in the morning, specifically if I'm going to train early. But I don't know that. I think intermittent fasting is much like all these other fads that come in and out, right? And it's sad because you get people. It's not a diet. It's just it's a protocol, right? And a lot of people got caught into this cycle where, like, oh gosh, like I can't eat until 12 o'clock. And when you really think about it, like, it might be good for the digestive system to get some breathing room, right? For sure. However, fuel is what our body runs on. Like, it runs on fuel. If we don't fuel the system, specifically in the early part of the day when you really kind of need to be on fire, in my opinion. And then I remember just hearing about people being like, yeah, well, intermittent fasting, I'll work out really, really hard, and then I'll try to stretch the amount of time I eat after my workout as far as I can until I'm like ferociously hungry. And at a certain point, it's just like, what is the point of this? Like,
Yeah.
why are people doing this?
And then you binge.
Right.
That's the other problem. So I think the reason why I was first excited about intermittent fasting was because of the autophagy, like the cellular repair, the cancer sort of detox phenomenon, which, like, obviously, given my background, I was very, enticed by. But what I didn't realize is that it really does create a lot of stress on your body, and that stress then affects your hormone health. And so from one perspective, I was very focused on cancer prevention, but I completely neglected this other side of my health, which is, my hormone health. So just to explain why it affects your hormone health, when you're hungry, your cortisol is going to go up because your body's feeling stressed. And so when your cortisol goes up, then the production of all your other hormones goes down. And so your estrogen, your testosterone, your thyroid hormones, those are all being dwindled because your cortisol is consuming all of the nutrients needed to, build those hormones. And so, 3 or so years into intermittent fasting, I lost my period. And if you looked at my labs, and if you looked at not just my basic labs, but my expanded labs, you would realize that all of my hormone levels were way too low. The problem is, and this sort of goes into the topic of infertility, no one knew why my hormone levels were low. They didn't know that intermittent fasting caused this decrease of hormone levels. When I went to my oncologist, he didn't know if it was my chemotherapy that caused it or anything else. When I went to my IVF doctor, he didn't really know that there was anything wrong, in the sense that, they were doing very superficial labs. And so their solution is just pump you with more hormones. So there was no root cause approach to, like, why does this girl not have her period? And how do we get her period back? Not just like work around it. And I think that for me, like, the journey that I've been on since is the healthcare system is going to just give me a Band-Aid solution. What I really need is to take that root cause approach and say, like, how do I get my period back? How do I put my body in a state of relaxation so it feels comfortable enough to do what it's meant to do, be fertile, produce the right level of hormones, and optimize?
I spent 5 years of my life from 2018 to early 2023, late 22, early 23, competing in bodybuilding. And I'd never thought that I'd be competing in bodybuilding. You know what I mean? I'm not like this big, huge guy, but someone had, challenged me to this thing, and I said, F it, I'm going to go for it. And so I was competing in men's physique bodybuilding naturally. And when I was done with it, I really hadn't been doing, I would get like blood work from my doctor, but nothing super in depth. In 2022, I was introduced to this company that I work with now, Blokes, and they ran a deep dive on my blood on my panel. They did a 70 biomarker panel, and we found out that my testosterone was absolutely tanked to the point where it was like scary unhealthy, right? I was like, low testosterone. I'm like, I'm in like the best shape of my life. Like, I didn't feel really tired. There was definitely libido issues that I didn't really like, it wasn't like, I didn't have any like dysfunction, but I wasn't like, raging to have sex all the time. But I didn't really like put that together with hormone necessarily. I was just like, I've been with my wife for almost 20 years. Like, like we don't have sex every day. It's all right. My hormones were absolutely tanked because of all the dieting and bodybuilding. And I spent 6 months out of the year in like a severe calorie deficit and 6 months of the year in a calorie surplus. And I never ate like a maintained protocol. Everything was healthy. I was eating great food, but I was just eating either too less or maybe a little bit too much. And I obviously stopped bodybuilding, right? Because I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, what am I doing? However, I could not get my hormone levels up naturally. So now I'm on testosterone, I'm on TRT, a low dose of TRT, which has been amazing for me. I'm super grateful that I started that, because when now I have normal levels of testosterone for my age, and across the board, male testosterone is down 25%. Mm-hmm. It just is across the board, all age groups.
Oh yeah, we see it all the time.
It's all age groups. It's down 25+%.
Yeah. And
so getting my levels back to normal have been awesome. My libido is awesome. I'm so grateful for that. But it's just so interesting. Food, right? Like,
it's the food and the stress, right? Like, it's the combination of the two. And I think we're just like used to feeling stress, and so we don't even know that it is stress. Mm-hmm. And that's the hardest part, when it comes to stress management, is just identifying what is stressful. And I think most people who are intermittent fasting have like convinced themselves to believe that they're totally fine in the morning without food, and like they're actually much clearer minded. Mm-hmm. And
I used to be that guy. I used to say like, exactly that.
Like, really though? Like, yeah. Are you? Like, wouldn't you be clearer minded if you weren't thinking at all about food and you could just focus on the task at hand, right? Or like, you don't need to have a huge meal that's going to tank your blood sugar, right? Because that's what ends up actually affecting your performance. But having something that's going to stabilize your blood sugar through the rest of the day is going to be really beneficial. And by the way, the time of the day in which your body absorbs the most amount of protein is the morning. And so if you are trying to gain muscle, it's beneficial for you to be having breakfast and maybe having an earlier dinner.
So that's why Meal One exists right here. I mean, it's literally a perfect balance of macronutrients. So there's all sorts of stuff about oats being like spiking blood sugar and doing all these things. And like, is it the right thing to eat? And, Paul Saladino and like these guys, just Dave Asprey, just bashing oats, right? If you ate a big bowl of oats by themselves in the morning,
obviously, yeah,
probably not the greatest thing to do, right? You're just hitting your body with carbohydrates, and you're going to burn them, and then you potentially will crash, right? However, if you add like 30 grams of protein and 10 grams of healthy fats and 10 grams of fiber, now you've got a meal that is super well balanced and is going to like sustain you until lunch, and feel like, for me, I just like, it is arguably the easiest, best way to get a full meal with 30 grams of protein every single morning.
And what's crazy is that it's only 350 calories.
Totally.
Which means for me, like, you can still add more to that to make it an even fuller meal, but this could be a snack.
Yep.
So it's so versatile. Like, you don't even need to just have it for breakfast. You can literally have it as something that you carry with you on the go.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously love talking about Meal One and Creatures of Habit, but like, I'm so happy that our conversation has sort of navigated to this like food and stress thing, because I think our relationship with food is arguably one of the most stressful relationships, right? It is just like, do I eat this? Do I not eat this? When do I eat this? When do I stop eating? When do I start eating? Can I have a cheat meal? Should I have a cheat meal? Can I go on vacation and just say fuck it and like enjoy myself? Like, oh man, like the kids want pizza. Do I have it or not? Like, it's a stressful relationship. It just is. And that goes for everybody, right? Like, big people, small people, tall people, short people, whoever you are, like it's a stressful relationship. And so can you give us a couple of things that you've done or things that you would recommend for people that are like sort of struggling with this relationship with food that could potentially be spiking their cortisol levels way more than they need to?
So I think the thing that's worked the best for me is realizing that not everyone is going to have the same diet. Like no one should have the same diet. And the reason for that is because everyone's reaction to food is different. Everyone's sensitivities, the way that you process food is different. So for example, let's just talk about blood sugar spikes. Oats may spike one person's blood sugar in some way. It might spike someone else's blood sugar in a very different way. And so being able to find what are the foods that spike your blood sugar and seeing sort of how your body responds is very empowering, because then it makes you feel a lot more comfortable eating those foods without any sort of concern as to how it's going to affect your health. Mm-hmm. And I think that finding those strategies to help minimize the blood sugar spikes when you do find those things that spike you is also really empowering, because it again allows you to then consume those foods in a healthy way. So let's talk about, like, let's say dessert. Everyone wants to have dessert, but making sure that you're having dessert when you're already have a full satiated stomach is really important, because then your blood sugar is going to spike a lot less. So it's not about necessarily eliminating all of these things from your diet, but being more strategic about how you consume these foods and seeing that translate into your blood sugar response. And so what I find very helpful is to put yourself on a continuous glucose monitor. We prescribe it at the Lanby, but I think a lot of doctors can prescribe it. You don't have to be a diabetic to wear a continuous glucose monitor. And during that time that you're wearing it, you can really test and experiment and play around with the order in which you eat food, the types of foods that you eat, how you prepare the food. It all affects how your body responds to that food.
But do you think that in itself is adding a level of stress? Like having this monitor on you and you're like everything you put into your body, you're like, ugh.
So I think it depends on the person.
Yeah.
I find that knowledge is power. And so the more that I know, the more in control I feel that I'm supporting my body in the right way, as opposed to just like hoping that it, I think that I am more likely to avoid something if I don't know its impact. Like, for example, if you're going to eat a bowl of pasta, for me, before ever wearing a CGM, I would tell you, like, no way, I'm not eating a bowl of pasta. And I'm much more likely to eat, Bonza pasta than like a white, normal pasta. Now I would tell you that I'm more likely to eat a fresh bowl of pasta with fresh mozzarella cheese and a fresh tomato sauce than Bonza, because Bonza is very processed. It has chickpeas, which they're actually processed and remove the hydration and fiber or whatever from the chickpea. So my blood sugar spikes like crazy. Whereas if I'm eating fresh ingredients and I'm pairing pasta with some protein and fat and fiber, like I'm much more likely to see a stable blood sugar response. And so I think it's finding those comparisons that then allow you to be smarter about how you eat. And then you're much more open to going to a restaurant and eating a bowl of pasta, but just knowing that in that restaurant, it's because they're making the pasta from scratch. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I think it's that to me is very empowering, and just in general, just not comparing yourself to anyone else. Like the thing that frustrates me a lot is when people will be like, but why don't you eat this? And why do you eat this? And I'm like, I'll tell you why I eat this and why I don't eat this, but that might not be what you should be doing. Mm. And so the best way for you to know is, honestly, I do think that everyone should have worked with a registered dietitian at some point. And registered dietitian, I say, it could be a health coach, it could be a nutritionist. But for me, we work with registered dietitians at the Lanby because we like that they have a clinical background. For us, it's very important that they have that clinical background because it allows them to analyze lab results. It allows them to work closely with our physicians so that they can work collaboratively on meal plans and care plans. And so it allows you to sort of transcend the wellness and the medicine in one thought. But, anyone that can really help you be balanced in your approach is very important. What I lacked when I was going through my journey was that guide. I ended up sort of being my own self-administrator and was just doing anything that I would hear was good. That's why I was intermittent fasting and not checking my labs to see how it was affecting my hormones. I cut out all carbs. I cut out, all things processed. I cut out all sugar. I cut out alcohol, which, a lot of those things are bad. But when you're so restrictive, you become very stressed about going out to dinner, eating out with friends and like enjoying those social interactions with people. And it becomes a very sad lifestyle. So I think it's this balance of like, how do you educate yourself and be able to make the smart decisions on the 80% of the time, but then give yourself grace the other 20% of the time that allows you to still live a joyful life.
Totally. So you said it right there. I mean, I basically lived this 80-20 lifestyle where Monday through Friday, I'm dialed in. And that dialed in for me is typically first meal of the day, 9 a.m. Unless my workout gets pushed a little bit later and I've got it, I eat a little bit later on. But it's typically breakfast at 9, meal 1. Snack between 9 and 1, between 9 and lunch is typically like some really delicious venison meat sticks that I love. There's a company called Maui Nui. If anybody is looking for a great snack, I mean, I'm a meat eater, so I love to snack on meat sticks. But I found this company called Maui Nui, and they are just like, it's 10 grams of protein, 55 calories. And it's like the cleanest meat stick in the world. So I eat 2 of those in between my first meal and my second meal. My second meal is at 1 o'clock typically, and it's just always like a clean, lean protein with some sort of carbohydrate like quinoa, typically quinoa, sweet potatoes, or squash, a couple handfuls of greens, some roasted asparagus and broccoli, and it's just like a delicious whole food healthy meal, typically 50 grams or so of protein. And then I have a snack in between my second meal and my third meal that could either be another meat stick or there's a couple of ready-to-drink protein shakes that I really like that are super easy, low calorie, but clean ingredients. And then dinner's at 6. And dinner is very similar to lunch, but a different protein, probably different vegetables, and a nice big healthy salad. And then I pretty much stop eating. Maybe I'll have a piece of fruit later on. But like that is my Monday through Friday. And it's always delicious. I never get sick of it. And for a sweet tooth quencher, I always have nightcap at like 8:30 at night. And so like I feel like 5 days a week, you kind of rock with that. And that doesn't mean my program has to be the same as yours. But like I was just laying it out because I think it's helpful for people to hear 9, 1, and 6, 2 snacks in between. You keep your metabolism moving. None of these meals are massive. There's never more than 5 ounces, 6 max of protein in a meal for me. And like on the weekends, I will traditionally start my day with meal 1, and traditionally I'll have like a nice, healthy, sort of similar lunch. But if not, I'm all good with it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if it's like, all right, we're going to brunch today, I'm like, let's go to brunch today. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm going to have the French toast and the, eggs Benedict. And because I move my body and I eat traditionally really well, I really do believe that is like such a great balance to have. Do you feel similarly?
I think that I've become a lot more consistent in that, like, I don't subscribe to like a weekday versus weekend rule. Mm-hmm. I think when I was in my 20s, I used to do that a lot more. And that's probably when it was less about like, this is just how I like to eat, and more like I'm forcing myself to eat this way. Now that I truly love to eat healthy, it's hard to convince me to like order pancakes. Like I don't want to order the pancakes because it will make me feel like crap. And not just like feel like crap in my stomach, but even in my head. Like I just don't feel like it's worth it. I feel so much better if I'm eating for the nutrition of what I'm eating, but also enjoying the food. I don't know how that makes sense.
No, I hear that. I hear it.
I'm someone who like when I'm eating my food, I'm like, am I getting enough protein? Am I getting enough fiber? Am I getting enough fat? And now that I'm trying to eat more fat because I'm trying to get my hormones back in check, like I'm extra conscious of how much protein and fat I'm eating. So if I'm eating pancakes, I'm like, oh my God, like now I need to eat an extra meal to get in all the other macronutrients that I need to get. And I guess that goes back to your point of like, maybe it's the fact that I still haven't perfected this like balanced approach of not being a stressful eater. I don't view it as stress. Maybe like someone else might perceive it as stress. I think for me, it's just like I genuinely like if you could ask me like what's your favorite meal, I would tell you it's like a stir fry of vegetables with either chicken or tofu in like Asian fusion
teriyaki
like
sauce.
Yeah. Like that's my favorite meal. It's not like a fried chicken sandwich. Like not at all.
I'm with you. So I just got back from vacation in Cape Cod, right? I was the only one that really like gave thought to what I was eating, you know? And because that's just the way I am, right? Like I think once you're in this lifestyle, you can't just flip the switch on and off, right? Like you just can't. However, I've gotten over the years, because I used to also battle too, right? Like if it was like, all right, we're going to all go out to eat at, you know, whatever, Papa Leonzi's family Italian restaurant, you know, like I'm not finding like a simply, you know, grilled piece of fish with some veggies there, right? It's just not happening. And so I used to get stressed about that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, man, it's not what I want to eat. I want to eat, like I prefer, because I genuinely do. Like I genuinely prefer to eat a lean piece of protein with a bunch of veggies. Like that is my
standard. The best.
It's like that's what I like to. That's what I like to do. Like I really love to eat that way. And it not only, and of course there is a it's like dysfunctional. There's no doubt it is like it, and I'm aware of that. You know, I know that I had dysfunctional eating for years when I got right when I got sober. I didn't know what to eat, but I met these two guys that told me who really introduced me to health and wellness, and they basically said like, everything you eat has got to be healthy. Like this is it. Like you're changing your life. And so I totally subscribed to that. But then there was people in the sober community that I was with that were like, you got to eat candy, man. Like you're getting sober. Like your body's craving something. And if you don't give it what it wants, it's going to figure out a way to get it. And that might be an alcohol, a drink or a drug. So like you should always have a candy bar in your pocket. And I'd be like, oh man, candy bar. So I had this really interesting like introduction into the world of wellness through my sobriety journey. But I've gotten way more comfortable now with going for brunch. And I think about it, but I'm also just like, you know what, man? Like the one thing that I think is crucial for people to understand here, listening to this podcast, because we've talked about some really great things. No matter where you are, no matter how far gone you think you are, no matter what's happened yesterday, the only thing that we have to do is get back up. Mm-hmm. The only thing you have to do, in my opinion, perfectly in life, it's the only one thing, is get back up.
Yeah.
Right? Like you could be on a 6-month not give a fuck eating binge and find yourself one day being like, oh my God, what have I done? There's nothing you can do to change that. However, you do have the opportunity right here, right now, to just get back up and say, you know what, I'm going to start. This is it. I'm not going to start tomorrow. I'm not going to start on Monday. Like, I'm just going to start. I'm going to start eating better. And if it's just one meal a day that you commit to, I'm going to start with my first meal of the day. So breakfast every single day for me. And I always suggest that as like the first step, because like if you're like, all right, I'm changing my whole entire meal plan, like it's not gonna go well.
Yeah.
But if you commit to your first meal of the day, typically the first meal of the day is going to paint a good picture of what the rest of your nutritional journey is going to look like that day. So if you start your day with a bagel and cream cheese and lox and like a donut on the side and a big frappuccino, like chances are you're definitely not going to have like a really simple, delicious salad with lean protein and veggies for lunch.
Honestly, I totally agree. I do think that wellness is not binary, right? Like you should be able to figure out for yourself what aspect of wellness resonates. And that's where the personalization piece comes in. Like ideally, you want that toolkit to be based on your biometric data. So what do you actually need to focus on versus a nice to have? But then once you figure that out, it's like you prioritize what modalities you want to actually emphasize. Not everyone needs to be so focused on nutrition if it's like really, really hard for them to do that. Maybe exercise is going to be where they want to start. But over time, I promise you that if you start caring a lot about your exercise, you will then eventually care about nutrition. And if you care a lot about your sleep and that's what you want to start by, eventually you will care a lot about nutrition because all of these things are interrelated. And so it really, you got to start somewhere and focus on that one thing. Don't try to do everything at one go. But over time, because of how interconnected these modalities are, you will find yourself becoming increasingly interested and motivated to improve other aspects of your lifestyle to be able to improve that one initial thing that you care about.
Yeah. I mean, I will just say that I learned so much about nutrition when I was bodybuilding. So much because I had to measure every ounce of liquid and every gram of food I put into my body. And I am a massive advocate for exercise. I believe that if this country all agreed and committed to walking 10,000 steps a day, no matter what, we would be in a completely different place. Just absolutely different place as a country. If everybody was like, okay, that's it. There's a new law. Got to get those 10,000 steps in. Just has to happen. Just got to happen.
And lift weights.
Yeah, and lift weights. But even yes, lift weights. Like resistance training, that's what I do. But just not sitting all day. Right? Just not sitting all day. And that's what 90% of the people that are struggling with weight do. Right? What I learned was it didn't matter like what the training was. Like the training could be absolutely the same. It all depended on what I was putting into my body. And that is what ultimately dictated the aesthetic, period, right? Whether I was in a surplus, whether I was in a deficit, or whether I was maintaining, I knew what my body was going to look like in all three of those protocols. And so nutrition is really like the
science.
It is just, we are what we eat, actually, like full stop. And so I do believe that nutrition is such a key. I want to finish on sleep, because I think sleep is, I've become way more involved in my sleep, and I struggle with sleep. Even though we have nightcap and I use it every night, my sleep is like, and it's not that I don't get enough sleep, it's that like, and I think it's also because I have some injuries, just chronic, that like my body just doesn't like just get into that deep restful sleep on a regular basis. But I would love to hear your thoughts on sleep and some sleep habits if you have any.
Yeah. So I'm not like a Nazi with sleep. I will say that I need to get at least 7 hours of sleep. I'm not someone who needs more than 8, but as long as I'm going to sleep by 10:30, like I have no issue waking up at 5:30. I will also say that I think that for a lot of people, like the thought of waking up at 5:30 and working out sounds very daunting, and most of you are saying to yourself, but like, don't you just want to get back in bed? And like even people like me who are so disciplined about working out in the morning, of course you have that inner conversation with yourself. It's like, should I just get back in bed? Do I have the energy to really work out? And the conversation that I have with myself is, I know that I'm going to feel better after I work out. So let me just continue to like literally go through the motions of getting myself ready to work out. And I'm going to get through this and it'll be great. And I start and I feel great, and it's always worth it. I never regret working out. But in terms of my winding down routine, again, I'm really not perfect about this. My night pretty much looks like I have dinner with my husband at 7, usually every night. So we're done by 7:45. I have tea after that and work probably for like an hour and a half. I try to be done by 9:30. So at 9:30, I'll get in bed. And honestly, again, like we watch TV until 10:30. And I don't think that that's good for everyone, but it doesn't affect my ability to fall asleep and it doesn't affect my ability to stay asleep. So I haven't needed to remove that, but I do know that we talk to a lot of members who struggle with falling asleep and staying asleep, and we try to really remove those the light, like, you know, the blue light between the hours of, you know, basically an hour before you're trying to fall asleep. And then, of course, when it comes to food, try to limit food 2 to 3 hours before you're going to sleep so that you're done digesting and you're able to actually, you know, relax. So those are the things that actually help me. But like for me, I haven't found that TV is an issue. I'm so tired by the end of the night.
Yeah, we watch TV from about 8:30 to 9:30 every night too.
If I could give myself a goal, it would be stop watching TV and read a book. But it's really hard when my husband has the TV on. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds so nice.
Yeah, I also believe that we're here to live our lives.
We're human.
You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
we're here to live life.
And that's what I'm trying to say. It's like I'm not perfect in every bucket of wellness. You got to pick your battles. You got to pick the things that for you are going to move the needle. Sleep has not been one of those things that I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get myself an Oura ring and I'm going to measure the quality of my sleep. Like, I'm perfectly fine with the quality of sleep that I'm getting. I feel so much energy throughout the day. I have no issues. Why am I now going to pick on this area of my life when things are going good? Like, if it's not broken, don't like mess with it. Whereas nutrition, I think for me was the answer to so many things, and exercise too. Like I would say those two are my biggest modalities.
I agree. This was such a great convo. I know that we wanted to get into the infertility, so it means that we're going to have you back on because I do want to talk about that. I think that that's a really it's something that you've gone through, and my wife and I have experienced that journey as well. So we will have you back on. But this was a great chat.
This was so fun. I feel like we could keep talking for
hours. We can. Where can the audience find you if they're local to New York or in the tri-state, you know, the Lanby?
So the membership itself is local to New York and a few other states in which we're licensed. Our physical location is in New York, and you can find out more on our website. It's thelanby.com. And then we also have a new offering called Just the Labs, which is available nationally. And that you can also find out more through the website, thelanby.com/justthelabs. And that is basically access to our functional lab panels, which are 98 biomarkers, and then a 45-minute consultation with our care team to review your lab results, understand what they mean, and then understand, you know, what you should prioritize as a next step in terms of your health and wellness. And in terms of Instagram, obviously at the.Lanby. And then we also have a podcast, which is a great way to demystify some of the health and wellness topics by me interviewing some specialists and experts in the field of health and wellness. And the podcast is called Get Well Better.
You're awesome. High five. High five to that. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, shapes, and sizes, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Creatures of Habit podcast. If you liked this episode, which I'm sure you did, it would mean the world to me. And I say this every single week, but it really would mean the world to me if all you did was copy the link and forward it to a friend. Share the podcast with a friend. Share it with a family member. Share it with someone you care about. Share it with someone you're battling with. This could be a bury the hatchet text message. I appreciate you guys a lot. I really do. I appreciate you a lot. And the podcast is growing, which is amazing. And it's growing because you guys are giving us awesome 5-star ratings and writing some nice reviews. So if you would keep that journey going for us, that would be super helpful. And aside from that, I wish you the absolute best day ever. Keep popping over to Creatures of Habit podcast. And until the next one, y'all. Peace.